You might have heard, but there's a new kid in town.
So it begins.
Except it's more like the old kid with a bit of a makeover. Yes, the new PHB for the D&D is out, and has been for a couple months. And so is the new DMG by this point when the video releases. I have somewhat avoided talking about the newest edition of D&D because I wanted to give it a real good read-through and testing so that I could be more accurate. Also, without the other core rule books, especially the Monsters Manual, certain things are hard to put in perspective without the whole picture at my disposal. So there are some things I just won't talk about until I get the whole collection. But we can discuss the new PHB in some detail. This won't be an exhaustive review. I think it's better to take little bites of this fairly sizable book so we can focus on the important stuff. Today, I'll give my first blush impression to kick things off, and we'll go into more detail in future videos. So let's discuss a few things I like about the Player's Handbook, and a few I don't. Number one, species. Specifically, the organization of the species chapter. If you remember with the old PHB, the race section was organized in a really confusing way. It was split into two parts. The first was for the common races like elves and dwarves, and the second was for the uncommon like dragonborn and tiefling. This separation for the two was terribly marked, and very often when I needed to reference something, I was like frantically flipping pages around the dwarf section, wondering where the hell the dragonborn was. But that's been eliminated. All other races are together in alphabetical order, nice and neat. But also, species. Because one of the big changes to the species was the removal of the ability score increase. This was moved to the backgrounds, which feels like you're maybe just trading one problem for another. Ability score increases were removed from the species for better inclusion into the game. You might want to play an orc wizard or a halfling barbarian, and you didn't want the species specs to hold you back. Inclusivity. But ability score increases with species did serve a purpose. It allowed the designers to communicate with the players how they imagined their race or species to be. And biology helped cement the fantasy. I would expect a 6.5-foot Goliath to be stronger than a 2.5-foot halfling. I just thought this problem was solved with Tasha's alternate rules of letting players move their ability scores around to fulfill whatever their fantasy was. And moving those ability scores increases to the backgrounds has its own inclusivity problems. Can my farm boy go off to become a wizard? It's kind of the same issue. What you do for a living can be kind of a sensitive subject. In some parts of the world, it's considered rude to even ask about it. If they really thought it was a problem, then I think the simplest solution was to just factor that math back into the ability score generation, increase the points for point buy and such. Number two, index. I absolutely hated the index of the old PHB. Loathed it.
Loathe entirely.
It was so unhelpful. The number of times that I would reference something only for the index to tell me to go to a different part of the index had me pulling out my almost non-existent hair. The amount of space and ink that was wasted when they just could have written the page number instead of just boggles my mind. But that's all over, because this index works like an index should. And I've had to build an index before. It can be a real pain in the butt. So I appreciate that they took the time to get it right. The index may be good, but some of the subclasses, not so much. Some of them are cool, and I'm not talking about all of them. I'm more talking about the cleric and the wizard. All classes get exactly 4 subclasses now, which is great for the barbarian, the bard, the druid, but not so great for the cleric and the wizard, which had 7 and 8 respectively. But those 2 classes had so many subclasses for a reason. For the wizard, it was because They specialize in a specific school of magic, of which there were 8. Now, they'll tell you the other 4 subclass specialists are still there in the old rules, and you can use them. I'll say that some of those schools could really stand for a revamp. I'm looking at you, Transmuter. I personally think they should have gone in a different direction, but that would have required them to come up with 4 brand new subclasses, and considering only 3 subclasses in the entire book are truly new, probably wasn't going to happen. The cleric is kind of even worse off. The cleric's subclasses determine what their god or goddess was all about, or at least the most important aspect that they worshipped. And that's a hard thing to represent in just 4 subclasses. Number 3, art. This is something that isn't in short supply. The new PHB has a plethora of very good artwork. I will admit that I'm the kind of person who looks at art in a game book of some sort and thinks that the space could have been used for, more cool game stuff. Having said that, the art in the book is very good and it's not too bloated. Now, it's not all new. There are a few reused pieces from like Xanathar's and other books, but most of it's new. All the subclasses get their own art, and it's gorgeous. In particular, I really like the art for the backgrounds, which, different from the other art sections, presents itself in a horizontal manner like a banner. And instead of featuring characters from that background, it features a setting, like a farmstead for the farmer or city walls for the guard, that sort of thing. It was nice and kind of unique. It really caught my eye, and art doesn't usually catch my eye, so that's saying something. What didn't catch my eye was the much touted crafting system, which just kind of sucks. It mostly just recycles the rules from Xanathar's and Tasha's. It's not bad per se, it's just not very different. A few tweaks here and there. It wasn't the system to be implemented that we were all hoping for. It's really just a consolidation of the rules from other books. And don't get me started on the crafter origin feat. I found this to be very disappointing. It mostly just allows you to quickly craft cheap gear with a very specific list. And then for some reason it lets you get non-magical gear 20% off. This is probably not too bad at very early levels and might help you scrounge enough gold together to get that plate mail. But once you hit like 4th level or so, I don't see this getting used very much. Number 4, weapon mastery. These will certainly get used plenty. Though I think everyone was pretty excited about the weapon masteries already, and I think they are living up to their promise. The simple truth is that the weapons in 5e were boring as dirt. There was nothing enticing about choosing one weapon over another. You usually just went with the most efficient choice, and that just kind of sucked. Some of them didn't always even make sense. Battle axe and the longsword were exactly the same weapon stat-wise, but the battle axe was cheaper? Why? Scimitars were 2.5 times more expensive than short swords, even though they were pretty much the same weapon. Why? Glaives and halberds are exactly the same weapon outside of their names. Why? Weapon masteries finally make these weapons truly distinct and offer a lot of strategy to combat now. The Vex mastery giving advantage on your next attack, Nick freeing up your bonus action, while still making that offhand attack. All of this just really gets the creative juices flowing for future builds and games. Speaking of weapons, spiritual weapon. I know there are those out there that say that this nerf was always coming, but I'm just going to have to strongly disagree. Spiritual weapon, as we know, was a bonus action to cast and to attack with every round. It did, like 1d8 plus 3 to 5 damage. Every other level up, casting gives another d8 to the damage. Now the spell requires concentration, where it didn't before. But in return, it upcasts every additional levels. I don't see this spell being cast once you hit 5th level, maybe even before that. I just never found this spell to be a problem. That needed nerfing. Powerful, yes, but not game-breaking. It's an average of 8 to 9 damage around with your bonus action. Whereas there are other spells that are encounter-ending that got no change. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. You're only fighting one opponent, you just shut them down. It's a 1st level spell. Yes, it requires concentration, but it really should. Hold Person can shut down an opponent and let you get auto crits against them. Also requires concentration, as it should. But now spiritual weapon requires concentration, unless you're a war cleric, and I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of war cleric builds. Number 5, Monk. The Monk got the VIP treatment in 2024, and it looked good. The Monk was the first class I played in 5e, and coincidentally also 3rd edition. I played the character for a good long while, and I'm not going to lie, it was a tough build to love. I was in a party with a fighter who was tankier than me and had a ranger who could put out more damage than me. He was a good skirmisher who could kind of fly across the board and maybe stun enemies and shut them down. But it was about all he was good for. It was pretty inconsistent. But the new Monk, much more interesting. It's not incredibly different to the point of not being recognizable. Just some tweaks here and there and make it function more smoothly. The other damage die scales better than the original. You can regain focus points, once known as ki, faster. Subclass got a similar treatment, especially the avatar. The way of the elements, which was famously garbage. But that one got a complete overhaul, which is pretty rare. Most changes to that edition to this one were fairly subtle, but not here. You get reach with your attacks. You can change the damage type to different elemental damage types, which at least helps dodge damage resistances, but we'll see how useful that is when the new Monsters Manual comes out. But there's a lot of versatility here, with the ability to fly and swim, along with elemental area attacks. Just a much smoother design. What's not a smoother design is the Ranger. It must be a sin to make the same stupid mistake twice. You'd think they'd learn. When the 5th edition Ranger came out, people were pretty underwhelmed, to say the least. Favorite enemies sucked, its other abilities were very situational. And one of its 2 subclasses, the Beastmaster, scaled horribly, and the other wasn't a whole lot better. Now, I personally think this criticism was a bit over-exaggerated, as the first game I played in 5th edition, as previously mentioned, had a Ranger in it, and they did a good fair bit of damage. More than anyone in the party, really. Admittedly, the rest of us didn't really know what we were doing. And let's be honest, a lot of the power comes from just how strong range combat was at the time. But over the years, there have been some updates to the Ranger that have really smoothed things out a bit. But they seem to have gone and just ruined everyone's fun. Again. The newest entry for the Ranger was equally underwhelming and pretty disappointing. A lot of the negativity comes from how favorite enemy now works. Again. It basically gives you Hunter's Mark for free and a couple of free uses. Now, it's not a bad ability per se, but it does kind of require you to use Hunter's Mark to take advantage of this ability, and you might not always want to do that. Hunter's Mark is unchanged, and it still requires bonus action and concentration, both of which you might want to use on something else, to weapon fighting or other spells perhaps. And the spell doesn't scale much. Now, for the Ranger, there are some special scaling. At 13th level, concentration on the Hunter's Mark cannot be broken by damage. That's a long time to go with a Hunter's Mark improvement. 17th level gives advantage on attacks for those who are marked by it, and 20th level has the damage go from a D6 to a D10. A massive increase. Why they skipped D8, I don't know. It seems like they could have just spread the increases out over the course of the class. Maybe D8 at level 7, D10 at 14, D12 at level 20. That's what I would have preferred. But shackling the class to one spell, it's not great. Especially when other abilities also compete for your bonus action, like, I don't know, the Beastmaster subclass that requires your bonus action to command your companion. Also not great. It will take some time and serious playtesting with the new Monsters Manual to see how all this shakes out. It could be that we're also exaggerating the problem with the Ranger again, and it won't be that bad. We must also factor in that ranged combat itself has taken a bit of a nerf with the sharpshooter feat being docked down, so that might skew our opinion of things. We're just going to have to see. So there are a couple of things that I like about the new PHB, and a couple I didn't particularly care for. I will go into more detail in the future. There are certain topics that I really don't want to get too deep in until I've given the new DMG and the Monsters Manual a good once over so that I have the whole picture. I think in the next video, we'll take a look at the awkwardness of the wizard subclasses and maybe come up with a few solutions to that kerfuffle. Tell me what you liked and didn't like for the new 2024 PHB in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, smash that like button, and I'll see you next time on Roleplay Culture.